All right. Well, Kufar Akbar, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Crescent discussion group. We are a live streamed YouTube live stream show that streams every Monday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we are dedicated to rightly dividing the truth between Christianity and Islam. And we stream from the cavernous cave, Kafir Cave, from Dar al-Harb, Kafiristan. And it is bright and sunny here today. Welcome. I appreciate everybody coming to the show and sticking around for the show today. Today I have an augmented, today's show is to augment a stream that I did with Lloyd DeJong on Saturday, which will be finished up tomorrow, if that makes any sense. We started a stream on Saturday that dealt with all of the evidence that exists for Mecca in the 7th century. And we didn't finish it up, so we're going to finish it up tomorrow. One of the things that kept coming up in his chat was the objections. What are the objections to Mecca? Diodorus and, the temple that all of the Arabs go to, Ptolemy and Macaroba. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at what the historians, the ancient historians, the most popular ancient historians had to say about Mecca. And I know we could probably end this show right now because they didn't say diddly squat about it. But what I want to do is I want to show you who these people were that provided a commentary on Mecca, or at least that region, and illustrate or illuminate the fact that nobody mentioned it. And it isn't just them. If you watch the show from Saturday and what I finish up tomorrow, folks, it isn't just the historians that wrote prior to the 7th century. We're talking about things that you would expect to find in a civilization. Archaeology, number one. You would expect to find people from surrounding cities, from surrounding empires, civilizations, commenting upon it. You would expect to find it on a map, and it's supposed to be along a major trade route. And guess what? It's not along a major trade route, and that's what all these things I illustrate on Lloyd's show. So if you get a chance, jump over there and give a like, give a subscribe to Lloyd if you haven't already. And some of the information that he brings up during the show is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, a lot of the stuff, I'm not going to say a lot of it. Well, I will say a lot of it. A lot of the things that he was bringing up, I had no idea about. And they make all the sense in the world. Okay, so is everybody ready? Look at the Donald Trump duck icon. Only Darcy would do that. And I'm not sure. Sharon's not here tonight. She said that she was feeling a little under the weather. And yes, Rob, this is what Rob is. I mean, this is simple. Exactly, Rob. This is so simple. Where there is no water, there is no food. You can't have food. Where there's no food, there are no people. Where there are no people, there are no cities. Where there are no cities, there's no civilizations. Where there's no civilizations, there's no religion. Mecca gets 4.3 inches of rainfall a year. Sagebrush has a hard time hanging on for life there, let alone, food that would, you would be able to provide to animals to graze or to, sheep to get milk or whatever. It's not there, folks. But yeah, it goes in a what is it? What's the word? A sequestive? No, a sequence. It goes in a sequence, a sequestive order. Is that a word? Paul, help me out here. Help me out. Is that a word? Sequestive? No.
Sequential.
I knew that didn't sound right. You moron. Yeah, sequential. I'm losing it. All right. Okay, so let's just jump over to the information that we're going to be providing today. Let me get this set up. I should have had it. I should have had it set up. I did have it set up, but I had too many windows open. You know, you get like 50 windows open on your computer, and you don't want to monkey around with them, and you're afraid you're going to shut down the wrong window. And I do it all the time on the show. It gets me in trouble. Okay, so let's take a look at the problems that we have with Ptolemy's Macaroba. Now, the reason why we go with Ptolemy's Macaroba, and I labeled it this, is because the most often cited example of somebody mentioning Mecca prior to the 7th century is Ptolemy. Ptolemy is a Greek Roman curator who ran the Alexandrian Library in Alexandria, Egypt in the 1st and 2nd century. And by drawing on all the major works that he had, he places this a city, an unknown, a city unbeknownst to people prior to this in Arabia. And it's called Macaroba. And people are going like, oh, Macaroba, like the Macarena and Mecca, it all sounds so close. Macaroba, Mecca. And then it actually snowballed into a 16th or 17th century historian, English historian. It's kind of like this garbage in, garbage out thing, where he said, well, this Macaroba that Ptolemy cited is Mecca. So people started running with this because everybody's thinking, well, you know, nobody mentions Mecca before, and we know it was there. Why? Because, you know, millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of Muslims at this time anyway, believe that Islam, you know, it started in Mecca, so that must be it. And people started going with it. Well, now that people are analyzing it and looking through it, they're saying, no, it's not true. There's no way it could be true. And that is what we're going to be looking at today. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, Lloyd has a channel that all the Kafirs need to follow. All the Kufar need to follow that channel. And I agree. And we did talk about the Zamzam well. We're going to be talking more about the Zamzam well. This show starts at 1 o'clock tomorrow, folks. So if you get over at 1 o'clock, it's one of the main things that I'm going to be talking about tomorrow is the Zamzam well. And
that is 1 o'clock Central Time, 12 o'clock noon for Eastern.
No, 2 o'clock Eastern.
2 o'clock Eastern. Okay, that's going to be.
Come on, Paul. What are you trying to do? Trip people up intentionally here?
I've been in Central Time and I've been kind of confused, and I'm only back a couple of weeks.
Okay. Okay. All right, so let's jump over to this. I got to sneeze before we. Excuse me. All right, here we go. Ptolemy's Macaroba. So now if you look at just this map, we notice that Medina is an ancient city. Medina, it used to be called Yathrib, I believe. It was Yathrib. And before that, it was something else. Can't remember. Doesn't matter. But Medina has a history that predates the 7th century, as far as I know.
It was Yathrib. It was Yathrib before.
Yeah. It's not an ancient city, though, but it does predate the 7th century. And they have evidence of that. And it was on a trade route that ran along the plateau here in Western Arabia. Now, if you look down here where Mecca is located, that is south and a little bit west. This map is a little over-exaggerated, but it is south and it is a little bit west of Medina. But when you look where Ptolemy places it on his map in describing its location, it is south and east, not south and west. So Ptolemy's location is not Macaroba. Plus, you have other people that we're going to talk about today showing you that the word itself is not even close to Mecca if you look at the Arabic. This information that I have for today's presentation, sorry, I feel like I'm a teacher again, comes from Dr. J. Smith's 504 Origins class that he teaches out at, I'm having a brain fart. What is the name of that school, Paul? Sorry, it doesn't matter.
Veritas.
There you go. Veritas. There we go. Okay. Dan Gibson's Nabatea, .net plus Quranic Geography plus early Islamic Qiblas plus the other book, his most recent book that Ptolemy lived. This question's in the chat. Ptolemy lived in the late first, early second century. So we're talking around like 90 to 150 AD. So quite a few hundred years before Islam. And then this guy right here, Dr. Rafat Amari, in Islam in Light of History, his book, a lot of the information for this comes from his book, and also a paper that he had written. Okay, so when we look at history itself, and this is what I like to do, I like to draw a contrast of what we're talking about. When we look at history itself, we have all kinds of archaeological evidence for the existence of the Roman Empire, from the Colosseum to these tile baths that they had, to buildings outside of Rome itself throughout the empire. We can say, okay, we knew that the Roman Empire existed. Same thing with the Egyptian Empire, with the pyramids and Avaris. This is Avaris up in northern Egypt. The Greek Empire. We have all kinds of ancient artifacts from the Greek Empire demonstrating its existence in the 4th and 5th centuries BC. We have artifacts from the Chinese Empire, from the Peruvian Empire, from the Babylonian Empire. That's me, by the way. Skinny guy. The Babylonian Empire. And Nineveh. When we go to Nineveh, you find stories from the Bible. Sargon II was the leader of the Assyrian Empire that carried off the northern tribes of Israel. You have Sennacherib, who laid siege to Jerusalem during the time of Hezekiah. It's me again. This is Sennacherib's palace. This is a picture I took. I took this picture here. So I've seen these things firsthand. These things exist, and they're verifiable, demonstrable today. Now, why is this important? Why do I bring this up? Number one, because there's no evidence outside of Islamic sources for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century. Nothing outside of Islamic sources for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century. There is nothing. If there is something, please, by all means, share it with me. I would love to, you can email me, erictheckefer@gmail.com. Oh, also, I want to mention, if you want a copy of this PowerPoint, email me and I'll send it to you. I'm not a hog. It doesn't take me long at all to put PowerPoints together. I don't mind sharing them with people if you're going to use them. Make sure you use attribution, though. It's always unprofessional. Anyway, let's see here. When we look at Mecca, there's no archaeological evidence for Mecca. And the first archaeological find, the latest archaeological find that they have for Mecca is dated to the 12th century, or the earliest. Let me rephrase that. The 12th century. The 12th century. That's 500 years, folks. Removed. There's no manuscript evidence for the existence of Mecca. Nobody mentions it prior to the 7th century. Nobody in Mecca or anything from Mecca or the surrounding areas of Mecca mention the existence of Mecca prior to the 7th century. There's no geographical evidence, meaning that there's nothing on when we look at Dan Gibson's Chronic Geography, it does not match. And I talk about that extensively in the PowerPoint or the presentation that I did on Lloyd's show, talking about how the Quran, the Hadith literature, the Sirah, all these things, they talk about Mecca being in a parallel valley. It's not. It talks about Mecca having grass, trees, olive trees.
That sounds like Petra.
Soil. What's that?
That sounds like Petra.
It sounds exactly like Petra. None of these things are in Mecca, and we can prove it. All you have to do is just dig down and start digging through the soil and analyzing the soil. If they had olive trees at any time in Mecca, at any time, you would find spores or seeds from these olive trees in the soil. And when you start digging in the soil, your only thing you're doing is digging through sand and rock. So there, and okay, I'm going to get away from that. But there's the geography does not match up. And then lastly, there's no cartological evidence, meaning that there's no evidence from any maps until the year 900 AD for Mecca. There's nothing there. So when we look at why Mecca is important, because this is supposed to be the place where Adam and Eve were cast down from heaven. Notice Adam and Eve were in heaven. They weren't created on the earth. So this is another thing that Islam gets wrong. That's going in my book. This is where Abraham and Ishmael supposedly rebuilt the Kaaba in 2000 BC. And I was talking to Ed about this at the beginning of the show. Even if you don't believe in a literal Adam and Eve, and that's fine. If you want to say that, I'm not saying it's fine, but I'm just saying if that's the way that you want to roll with, placing some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Some type of, not theological. What's the word I'm looking for? Allegorical meaning to Genesis 1 through 11. That's cool. Go ahead and do that. But when we start talking about historical, the Bible treats Abraham as a historical person, and so does Islam. Islam treats Abraham as a historical person. So if you want to look at the historical aspect of Ishmael and Abraham rebuilding the Kaaba, you're talking about an event that supposedly occurred around 1900 to 2000 BC. That puts the Mecca at being a city that is supposed to be 4,000 years old. That's why that's important. The Quran is saying that Mecca is at a minimum 4,000 years old. You have to have found something there that demonstrates something that existed for 4,000 years, for Pete's sake. It's called the mother of all cities. It's a place where you had previous pagan religion. This is where supposedly Muhammad began his prophethood, was at the Hira cave. This is where you have hundreds of prophets are supposed to be buried there. And this is where you have 1.6, 1.82 billion, however many people you want to say, bow towards 5 times a day. This is where you have to visit once in your lifetime and do the Hajj, folks. Mecca is essential. If Mecca did not exist, Islam falls apart completely. And this is why I absolutely love this information that we go through here. Not because I want to break Muslims' hearts or I want to, destroy their faith. That's not my goal here. My goal is to have people turn to Jesus Christ and who Jesus Christ is. And Islam describes Jesus Christ as being nothing but a silly little prophet, not the Son of God, not the Savior of the world. And so if you can show that Islam is false, there you go. All right, let's go to the next one. Archaeological, cartological, geographical manuscript evidence from Mecca prior to the 7th century. There it is. It's all right there. Go ahead and read it. Can you read that for me? Anybody?
Totally blank. I don't see anything. Maybe it's too small for me to see.
I went in and I looked for it. You know what I did do on that other slideshow is I went in and I asked ChatGPT, can you provide me the evidence for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century? And the ChatGPT starts off with there's abundance of evidence for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century. All of the Quran mentions Mecca, the Hadith literature mentions Mecca, the Sirah mentions Mecca. There's all kinds of archaeological evidence for Mecca. There's topographical. Okay, so I went in and I typed after they said archaeological evidence. I said, can you list what archaeological evidence supports the existence of Mecca in the 7th century? And then it comes back and says, this is after it says there's an abundance of evidence for it. It comes back and says they do not allow archaeology to be practiced within Mecca itself. But there's plenty of evidence outside of it. I'm thinking, that
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I brought it up on Lloyd's show. And it doesn't, I don't know. Okay. Yes, you're exactly right, Rob. It's redacted back from the 8th, 9th centuries, mainly the 9th century. Okay, let's jump back to this Hamajama. There we go. All right, Islamic claims. This is what Islamic awareness says about Mecca, the existence of Mecca. Now, folks, this is an article from Islamic awareness. Islamic awareness, if you're not aware of the awareness, this is the leading website that provides an apologetic for Islam and defends Islam against the charges of the kuffar. Here's what they said about Ptolemy. It's interesting to know that Claudius Ptolemy of Alexandria, mathematician, astronomer, flourishing about a century after Pliny, undertook to make an atlas of the habitable world. He was not descriptive geographer, and his book was intended to be no more than a commentary on his maps. He enumerated some 114 cities or villages in Arabia Felix, which is Central Arabia, for example. And then he provides a list here. And then he starts talking about inscriptions on temples. This is the Laxaphia of Stephen of Byzantium, the Yathrib of the early, so it mentions those cities. But notice it doesn't say anything about Mecca. It doesn't, in its defense of this, it doesn't mention anything about Mecca. So when we look at who Claudius Ptolemy was, that was asked in chat. Who was he? He was a Greek. Well, actually, he was the curator for the library in Alexandria. The Library of Alexandria was the Western civilization's hub for maintaining all of these great writings from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle, all of these great ancient writings. And he was the curator of this. And so being the curator, he would have access to all of these writings and be able to put together an idea of what the entire world looked like. So he puts together, using meridian lines, a round Earth. And in doing so, he is called the cartographer by making maps. He lived in Alexandria. Okay, I talked about that already. And oh, by the way, the Alexandria Library was burned by the Caliph Umar, if you believe that anyway, in 638. And his justification for this was, if anything in there agrees with the Quran, we already have the Quran, so we don't need it. If anything in there disagrees with the Quran, well, then it needs to be burned because it's wrong. That was his justification.
Eric, what's the problem with that, with what we're supposed to teach children?
Having an open mind, looking at different points of view.
They tell us to teach that the Muslims preserved the knowledge.
Oh yeah. They're supposed to be the preservers and maintainers of ancient civilizations. It's a bunch of bunk. It's not. And when I think about that, it just chafes my. Well, the number one, there's nobody outside of Islamic literature mentions. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, or Ali. Nobody mentions them. So when Umar supposedly went storming through Jerusalem in 638, establishes the Pact of Umar, goes into Alexandria, evidently nobody thought to write it down and maintain any of these writings and saying, hey, these people are attacking us. They called them Hagarenes, after the line of Hagar. They called them Saracens, after people who Sarah was sent out. So all of these names that they were given, they're not called Muslims, and nobody in particular, to include Muhammad, is mentioned by these people, or a Quran for that matter. I'm sure people are aware of that. Let's see. He was the head of the library. There it is. I was wrong. Well, no, he was born in the 1st century, but he was the head of the library for 23 years here. And so therefore he would have access to all of these maps, to all of these writings by all of these ancient writers and explorers that lived prior to that. And and he was instrumental in meridian mapping. I already wrote that. And he wrote a guide to geography. And he did this over 6 years. And it came in several different volumes, if I'm not mistaken. And so he is the one that calls the city Macaroba, which people are claiming to be Mecca today, which Islamic apologists claim. But if you look on this map right here, let's see here. Here is, this right here is Yathrib. This right here is this is the city. The name of the city is Latharipa, prior to being called Yathrib, then being called Medina. And right here is the Macaroba, or Macaraba. Mecca is over here, folks. Medina, Mecca, Macaraba. So this is not the same city. This is where Mecca is supposed to be when we look at it on a map, on Ptolemy's map, because these are all the different locations that he mentioned on his map.
Hey, Eric, have you ever heard of a city just getting up, picking up its skirts and running down, what are you talking about, 50 miles, 100 miles?
It could, if they were being attacked, and if they had a good transportation system. Maybe if they took the train.
But a whole city gets just picking up and running. I mean, well, I understand. I mean, they're tent people, but
again, why would you? This is the thing about Mecca. If you look at a series of cities here, and this is what I cover in that presentation that I did on Lloyd's channel, it'll show you a series of cities all along the plateau here. A lot of people don't realize this. Mecca is not on the plateau. Mecca is 3,000 feet off of the plateau, meaning that you have to travel down to Mecca, to a place that has no water, no grass, no food, no people, they have none of these things. And then if it's some other cities, you have to travel back up 3,000 feet, back up on the plateau to continue on this route. It makes zero sense for people to go to Mecca. There's no reason for people to go to Mecca. And so when you start talking about moving a city there, why would you move a city there to begin with? There's no way to survive there. Okay. Get me all riled up. Stop. Okay, a couple more facts.
One other thing. On the other side of the Red Sea is where all the shipping docks were.
Yes. And that's an important point, Ed, because what you can by knowing that. Let me go back to that map. Number one, and this is where people have said, well, why would you take goods off of a ship and then load them onto camels and then walk them across a land route when you could just keep them on a ship and sail them up the Red Sea? That's number one. But number two, there are no ancient ports along the eastern seaboard of Arabia here. None. All of those ancient ports are along the African coast. And it's about a 6-day jaunt up there, 5 or 6 days jaunt. And all of these ports that are on the eastern side of the African coast here are supported by archaeological evidence that date back to, I think, BC, the 1st or 2nd centuries BC. So, you don't have any evidence of ports over here anywhere near that time period, and they're all over here. Why in the heck are you even thinking about having this on a trade route right through here? Why are you even coming? Would you even think about coming 3,000 feet down and then back up into a desolate valley? It makes zero sense. And that's one of the main things that Jay brings up during his presentation. Okay, Macaraba is not mentioned prior to the 2nd century anywhere. That's one of the points. If you're going to say Macaraba is Mecca, nobody mentions it anywhere prior to the 2nd century. So let's just pretend this is what Pliny is talking about. Why hadn't somebody mentioned it if a city that's a mother of all cities that has existed since 4000 BC? And so that time it would be what, 2,700 years old, 2,600 years old. Why not bring that up at a minimum that old? Why not bring that up? Nobody knows why. Now there was a city, and this is what Lloyd brought up in the presentation. So if you want to jump over to Lloyd's channel after tonight's show is over, of course, if you want to jump over to Lloyd's channel, there's a city called Makrib, near Medina, and he says that it deals with the calling of a certain god or something like that, which they think might be an illusion. I don't know. You'd have to go back to his show and watch that. Again, Makaraba is east, Medina, or Makaraba is east, Medina is west of Medina, and also Ptolemy describes it as being in the fifth of a series of 6 cities down towards Yemen, and a lot of people think that it's in Yemen, not in Arabia or Oman. There we go. Sorry, or Pliny mentions it Makaraba, which is in Oman, and it never appears again on any classical survey. This is the only time, the one and only time Makaraba ever appears on any map or survey. And when we look at the previous ones, they, like I just said, they don't mention. So let's take a look at a couple other civilizations and see how they compare. When you look at Jerusalem, does Jerusalem have physical evidence that supports its existence dating back clear to the 11th century BC? Yes, it does. And the more that they dig in and around Jerusalem, the more evidence they find for it. Nobody doubts the writings of the Jewish writers when they're describing places like Mount Carmel, or when they're describing the Dead Sea area when David's fleeing Saul, or when they're describing the Galilee. Nobody doubts that. They don't doubt the antiquity of the 15th century return of the Hebrews into their land after a Exodus. During the Exodus, the geography, and when we look at Luke mentions 110 different places in his gospel, or 100. He names 110 locations in his one gospel, where the Quran lists 65. Follow this, folks. I think I have it in here. If I don't have it in here, remind me to mention that. Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great lived in the 4th century BC. He sanctioned one of his naval commodores, captains, or whatever, to go out and explore the Arabian Peninsula in and around it. He's supposed to go on the entire coastline of it. This includes the Red Sea. And he says there's no inhabitants, cities, or harbors to give anchorage for his fleet. Where? The Arabian Peninsula along the Red Sea. This is where you would expect to find Joppa, which is the port city that supplies Mecca. It was not there. So this corroborates the later Greek writings that state that the region itself is uninhabitable. You cannot grow anything there. People cannot live there. Why? They have no water. You have no water. You have no food. You have no food. You have no people. You have no people. You have no cities. You have no cities. You have no civilization. You have no civilization. You have no Islam. Period. One of the first writers that explored there was Theophrastus, and he wrote in the 4th century BC on the geography of Arabia. He talked about the Sabians, which were up. The Sabians were south. I'm sorry, in the southern part of it. Wrote about their trade, their land, their marine routes, described it in detail, described the region in detail, and never once mentions a location named Mecca. So this demonstrates that Mecca was not part of the Arabian trade in the 4th century as insisted upon by Muslims today. So he was also a writer who specializes in details, and he left this detail out of this mother of all cities, this one detail? No, think not. Let's see. How do you say this? Eratosthenes.
Eratosthenes.
Thank you. All right. Well, his survey. So he lives.
I don't know, Eratosthenes, I believe.
There you go. That's right. Eratosthenes. There you go. That's exactly that's. You're right. That's how you. I've actually looked and say how to pronounce these names. I've gone into one of those. I don't know. You type in the word and they pronounce them.
I have to do that every week for who's on the show. It's frustrating.
There you go. Eratosthenes. Yes, he lives in the second and third centuries BC, and he also documents the geography of Arabia. And they're doing this because they want to control the spice trade coming from India to Yemen. And he measures the length of the Red Sea along the west coast, because you need to know how long it takes to sail up the Red Sea. And he provides a survey of all of the marine routes between Yemen and the Gulf of Aqaba. Now, the Gulf of Aqaba is where you get to the northern part of the Red Sea. It splits into two. You have the Gulf of Suez that goes westward, and the Gulf of Aqaba that goes eastward, that continues to run along Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula. And he, again, describes all the people he encounters there, locations of the region, and he says that the region where Mecca is uninhabitable. Why? Because there's no water. You don't have any water. You don't have any food. You don't have any food. You don't have any people. You don't have any people. You don't have any cities. No cities. No civilization. No civilization. No Islam. He doesn't describe any villages. Why? Because there weren't any. That's why he doesn't describe them. There's no other explorers prior to him that described this. And again, if this was supposed to be a place for a pilgrimage, where's the evidence for this? Where are people riding on rocks on their trip to Mecca? You know, we're making this annual this great pilgrimage to our ancient city, yada yada yada. You would think that they would write that on there. Also, by the way, go ahead.
One thing I'd like to mention here, have we not seen in the past few Hajjs where people have passed out or died from heat exhaustion and thirst, lack of water?
Yeah, this year specifically, I think there was like 1,000 people who died.
Yeah. So how is it that there's not this long graveyard back and forth from for the pilgrimage to Mecca for all these centuries? Why aren't we not seeing that?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a great point. Where is it? Yeah. Where are these? Yeah. Where are these routes, these paths that these people took? Where are the inscriptions on the rocks that they would have? You know, let's take a break. It's got up to 127. I wanted to get down to a cool 112 before we move out again. So when you're sitting in the shade, you're going to scratch on the rock, saying, "Man, it's hot, but we're going to get to Mecca." You know, you would write something, but.
Yeah, and the wild animals, you know, just wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. I need to take this off. I had my watch on all night last night.
Yeah, part about wild animals makes me laugh because that section in Sharia on hunting, like, where are you going to find them? If you're living around Mecca, where are you going to find those wild animals?
Yeah, well, you might find a couple of lizards, I guess, but I don't know what else you would find. Okay, so Eratosthenes does not mention Mecca. Why? Because it's not there. And this, you know, when we start talking about following the land route, if this is supposed to, like I just said, if this city is supposed to be 2,000 years old at this time, over 2,000 years old at this time, you know, it's game over. You have to have something there. And the fact is that they have nothing. This is the map of the world that Eratosthenes drew. And again, this is the 3rd century BC. It's really crude, but this is what they believe the world looked like. And they're semi-close. You know, they overemphasize, of course, the size of the Mediterranean. But look how big Arabia is. You know, they get Arabia pretty close. They don't go as far south with Africa as they should. But okay, Agatharchides. Agatharchides survey is one of the most popular ones. He lived in Alexandria, Egypt in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, and he is supposed to be the most important geographer of this time. He had a lot of association with the royalty, the ruling class there in Egypt, the kings, and they tapped him because of his knowledge of the Red Sea. And he had access to all of the writings of all the prior geographers, just as Ptolemy did. So everything that existed prior to that, he had access to it. And he classifies a lot of these people as being eyewitnesses. And this is important to know that Ptolemy was not an eyewitness. Ptolemy never set foot in Arabia. So he's just going off of what people had written about. Agatharchides is different, and he's using the writings of people who were actually eyewitnesses. I'm not saying that Ptolemy did, but Ptolemy was, there's a difference between boots on the ground and chiming in with your opinions. Let's see here. The expeditions that were conducted in the 7th and 8th centuries confirmed his writings, and he also provides measurements along the Red Sea because of they're trying to establish trade. There it is. The links of the trade routes were important. He mentions the Nabateans in Jordan, and he also lists all kinds of other places along the Red Sea to include temples, and this is important because temples were very important to the Greeks. So wherever there was a temple, they would mark it down. So if the Kaaba, if you had a Kaaba in Mecca at this time, it would have been listed, and it's not. It was of great interest of the Greeks, and he lists all the other tribes that are in around the Red Sea, but does not mention Mecca or the Quraysh tribe. And let's see, Mecca would have been a great interest to this Greek writer. Why? Because it's supposed to have this Kaaba, which is supposed to be the center for worship for all of these people that were making Hajj there. And again, he is another one that turns around and says this place is uninhabitable. Nobody can live there. Why? Because there's no water. No water, no food. No food, no people. No people. It's easy to understand. Okay. Diodorus' temple. This is another one that's often used by Muslims as an excuse for showing that the Kaaba existed. He's a Greek historian who writes in the 1st century BC. He writes a 40-book history of that region, and he wrote of a temple that all Arabs came to honor and worship in. So here, of course, Muslims are going to go, well, that's the Kaaba. Everybody in Arabia at this time went to the Kaaba to worship, to honor that place and to worship there. Well, the problem is the temple that is described by Diodorus is in the land of the Zamanes, I can't pronounce that. And this, again, is in northern Arabia around the Gulf of Aqaba. If you go, here's the Red Sea, and here is the Gulf of Aqaba up here, and this is the Gulf of Suez. The Bazanine, right there, Zamnes, whatever they're called, lived right here. Mecca is down here. There's a 600-mile difference. This is a huge difference, folks. Okay, let's see. The well-known temple because of the number of caravans that came from the interior. And they said that Muhammad worshipped at a temple during his invasions of Tabuk, which is in northern Arabia. So this might be that temple that they're talking about. And again, this location is confirmed by Agatharchides and also by the Byzantine ambassador in 530 AD. But nobody mentions in Diodorus' writings, he does not mention Mecca. So here you have the Gulf of Aqaba. Down here you have Mecca. That's a huge difference, folks. It's 600 miles. Artemidorus' survey, again, this is 103 BC. He includes, again, more geographers, his personal observations with the people along the Red Sea. He talks about all kinds of uninhabited islands themselves along the coast. And he makes it clear, folks, that the area where Mecca was uninhabited in 103 BC. So this throws out this notion that Ishmael helped Abraham rebuild the Kaaba in 1900 BC. It was uninhabited. Nothing was there. Strabo. Now, this is probably the best one right here. Strabo, he's a Roman geographer. Folks, you might want to write this guy's names down. Strabo. He's a Roman geographer, and he travels with a Roman general, Gallus. Now, Gallus is sent from Egypt down the Arabian coast to Yemen to conquer the Yemenese people. And along the way, they are starving Marvins. It was and they go from the Red Sea, and they go 100 miles inland into Arabia itself. And let's see, 3 stations are mentioned as part of this route. Okay, now the army is needing supplies along the way. And what I mean by supplies, folks, this army is starving. They need food. So any village, hamlet, city, whatever is going to be noted and explored, so these people can get some food. Somebody somewhere in that area would have mentioned Mecca to Strabo's army, or to Gallus's army. And Strabo would have been able to record it. But nobody thinks to mention Mecca. So you have, somebody like Dio Cassius. He even talks about how terrible this expedition was for Gallus, because the men were going through starvation, privation during the expedition. So they were desperate in their scavenging for food for the army. And he also mentions other geographers in the that went through the area, and none of them mention Mecca. And he does write down all these other known villages in around Mecca today. So all of those villages that we know existed at this time, and at the time that Mecca is supposed to have existed, he makes note of those, but he does not make note of Mecca. And the reason why he did not make note of Mecca is because it did not exist. And this is the route. Thank you. This is the route that he took. So he would have gone right by Mecca. He would have talked to people in and around Mecca. He would have talked to cities, all the towns and villages along the way. Nobody mentions Mecca. Okay, this Peripolis of the Erythraean Sea, this is a book that is supposed to be the most reliable historical document on the trade routes and around of Arabia. It's written in the 1st century, and we don't know who wrote it, but it is really irrelevant because of its accuracy. It's a very accurate book. The guy who did write it lives in a place that is in northwestern Arabia along the Red Sea. I think it's even along the Gulf of Aqaba, if I'm not mistaken. And they think he's Greek, and that traveled along the regions as far eastward as India. And he was very, very familiar in his writings of the central tract of Arabia. And the accuracy of the book is corroborated by other geographical and historical evidences that are mentioned there. And he talks about cities that existed hundreds of miles from the Red Sea shoreline. He talks about cities that were also of little of importance. He mentions names of the kings and tribes that lived along there. He talks in detail about the region surrounding Mecca. But what does it say right here? He does not mention Mecca. Now, this is a city that at this time had supposedly existed for 2,000 years, but yet going through, providing a meticulous description of the western coast of Arabia, western part of Arabia, Mecca does not get a mention. And I think this is the last one, folks, is Pliny's survey. There is Pliny the Younger, who we know to be famous for mentioning the crucifixion of Christ. His father, Pliny the Elder, lived up until 79 AD. He writes natural history, and he's known to have written the most important books that contributed to Roman life and their times. He describes 92 tribes in Arabia and nations. He does not mention any of the tribes which Islamic tradition claims to have lived in Mecca. He doesn't talk about the Quraysh. Well, why is that? What was the? Who knows? Does anybody know what the other tribe in Mecca was? Does anybody know that off the top of your head, either in chat or here in the panel?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember it either. It's not important, but they're not mentioned, so it doesn't really make a bit of difference. They're not mentioned either. But he does mention 69 cities and villages in Arabia, but fails to mention Mecca. Now, this writing is important because it covers all of the regions of Arabia at that time. And he was so detailed that he mentioned tribes that occupied the desert Arabia, but does not mention any tribe around Mecca. So he mentions all kinds of other tribes, but he does not mention the Quraysh or any other tribe in and around Mecca. And here's the thing to know. Pliny does not mention Mecca, despite all of his writings about all kinds of other locations that are even insignificant to the mother, compared to the mother of all cities. So what is the conclusion? Well, the conclusion is number one, Ptolemy does not mention Mecca. He places Makaraba, which is east of Medina, which it should be west. Hallelujah. All of the people who are your most trusted and authoritative writers talk about all kinds of other places that are known to have exist at that time, but none of them mention or allude to Mecca. These writings that were developed are meant to establish rule over people, trade routes, to wage war. I mean, they were important, and everybody fails to mention Mecca. And then lastly, which I think is most important, is there's no archaeological evidence supporting Mecca in the 7th century. Okay, and all evidence of Mecca appears to have been redacted back on the standard Islamic narrative. So if you want a copy of that, folks, you can go ahead and email me. Let me type my email address into the chat here. Does anybody have any thoughts on that they want to?
Yeah, I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Who's this, Nico?
I just want to say.
Oh, Brad.
Listening to that. This is Brad.
Hey, Brad.
Listening to that. That actually has to be
It's true Islamophobia at its finest.
I mean, seriously, how can you say that Mecca did not exist? I mean, don't you understand that everything that you just said proves Mecca existed? The fact that there's no archaeological evidence is because Allah protected it. You see? He protected it from the Kafirs.
I could see some sort of, and to be honest with you, I could see that some sort of apologetic could be developed based on that idea that Mecca is supposed to be this important city. This is why he protected all these Kafirs that would dare to, come down their coastline, exploring, going inland and looking around, that he protected the site of Mecca from them. But there's so many problems with that idea that it's disgusting. There again, you're asking for you're invoking the supernatural in a world that is dependent upon natural evidences.
again, it's just a miracle, that he protected, kept it invisible. Just like the Quran that is corrupt but not corrupt, it's a miracle because it contained different variants. He preserved all of it. It's a miracle. Everything's a miracle of the Quran. Scientific miracles that don't exist. Neil Armstrong heard the call to prayer on the moon, and he discovered the crack in the moon, and he became a Muslim. Do you know that? Yep, it's true.
I heard that one. Yeah.
And NASA's covering it up. Yeah.
A little funny note here. I was listening. I think it was over the weekend. I don't know, for some reason I clicked on I was looking through the videos on the channel, and it was when we had Hatun on. And let's see, there was Hatun. Of course, I was on there. Chris Claus was on there. You were on. You had come on there. Kenny Bomer was on there, and who's the guy from Australia? Rob
Krishna, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and he was on there, and Kenny made the comment, or I was going to say, well, I'll bring up Robert Rells, or he's going to have some questions for you. And Kenny's like, Robert is a disgusting person. I would never talk to him. And that guy from Australia, Robert from Australia, is like, what are you talking about? He thought he was talking about him.
This devil, Robert Wells, Robert.
Yeah, that guy.
What's funny about this? Honestly, I have no idea why Kenny hates me so much. I mean, honestly,
Please, come on, Red.
No.
Come on.
I didn't do anything to him. I'm perfectly innocent.
I'm not.
But
I thought you were actually pretty friendly with him. You came on his transphobic episode, remember?
Yeah, I ran the show on him. But,
he dropped off his own show.
No, seriously. I mean, no, yes, I know that getting all his personal information and stuff, blah, blah, blah. But he hated me long before that. I only had that one brief interaction with him on Facebook, okay, where he's like, do you know who I am? And I was listening to speaking, so I wouldn't, even type in the first verse, I'm Kenny Bomar, the author of the book, Consider Islam, Defeating the Propagandist of Hate. And I'm like, okay, so I went to Google.
He was a doctoral student, too, at the
Yeah, he was a doctoral student, too, yeah.
Freshman
So I went,
doctoral student.
yeah,
freshman level.
I go to look for the book, and I'm like, dude, am I spelling your name right? Did you put it under, nom de plume? Because I can't find it on Amazon. He's like, the book isn't published yet. I said I'm the author of the book. I didn't say anything about publishing it. And I'm like, well, it's kind of misleading. Shouldn't you get it published? Before you start saying, no, if you take any of the classes on writing, they always tell you promote yourself. And I'm like, okay. Then he says he's a doctorate student. And I swear he said Michigan University. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm like, what's your thesis or whatever? Someone thinks, well, I haven't got my bachelor's degree yet, but I'm a doctorate student. I'm like, dude, yeah. Whatever.
Well, yeah, and that was what I was. That's what I was. What got him so? Remember that part where he hits the desk in the intro?
Oh yeah, that was with
Danny told him that. I go, I don't believe that you went to Michigan. It's Michigan University, not Michigan. It's Michigan, and he does pronounce it. He does pronounce it, Michigan, but it's hard to understand. The Sentinel is what he went by. Rob, the Sentinel, something. That's I went back and tried to find who it was. But when he said, I hate Robert Wells or I hate or whatever.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So he was like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? I'm a scumbag. You've never dealt with me before. Give me a chance. I might hit your mark. But
yeah,
anyway,
that was.
And there's a link right there to a little while back when Kenny was doing his live show, where
excuse me,
somebody went on there and burned the Quran while his show was going on.
Hold on. Yeah, I remember.
Who did that?
We're not going to.
That was funny. I remember seeing that.
We're not going to mention who.
It wasn't me.
No, it wasn't you. It wasn't you. Let me see here.
The way Maududi interprets this passage,
Oh, sorry.
what it's saying is this.
It's right
The
here.
people of the book need to accept the messenger if what he says confirms the scripture. If the scripture is lost, as you say it is, if the scripture is corrupt, if they don't have it anymore, then they cannot know whether the messenger confirms the scripture. That's the objection. Does it make sense, Kenny?
It makes sense, but I think you're conflating a couple of different issues here. Okay, for one, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Quran is coming to confirm what Allah originally did.
That's funny.
Okay, unfortunately, it has been tampered with. I mean, scholarship proves that it's been
You didn't
tampered.
notice that?
So,
But that's not what the Quran says.
Did he even notice it?
Oh, he does. Kenny doesn't, but
what the Quran
somebody else does.
is referring to what was originally given to these people, and that's not including what's been tampered with. So it's
Bruh.
obviously
you see what he's doing?
the messenger of our Creator.
Can
What
you
is
see what he's doing?
a totally
Can
different.
you see what this Christian is doing? Burning the Quran in front of you.
He's
He's
doing.
burning the Quran.
Oh, wow! Look, this is
This is
the
recorded, right?
You
This is
would.
what
This is burning the Quran. Look at that. This is recorded, guys. This is
unbelievable.
a live recording now. Look, he's burning the Quran.
Who is that telling him that? Is that little?
Jazz, or I think is who it was.
Yeah, that little gremlin-looking guy. Yeah, I remember seeing that. I couldn't remember whether Kenny noticed it or yeah. You know, and I'm not a book burner type guy, but when I had my pastor. Remember that there was the guy from Florida. Terry.
Yeah, he called Osama and wanted him to come down and be there when he burned the Quran. And Osama says, "No, I want people to read it so they can find out what the enemy wants."
Yeah,
Didn't that guy buy like 10 or 20,000 Qurans, and he had him on a flatbed semi-trailer truck, and they pulled him over because he was going to have a huge bonfire of Qurans, and they're like, "No, you can't do that." Isn't that the guy? Do you remember that? He
I
had,
remember.
this whole.
Yeah, I remember the incidents, but I can't remember exactly all the details. I
Oh,
remember
he did it multiple times. But the last time he had a flatbed semi truck, and it was stacked high with Qurans, and he was going to take it. They're going to build this big bonfire, and the cops pulled him over. And they're like, "No, you don't have a permit to build a bonfire."
yeah, and there's I think there was a church. Wasn't there a church that got vandalized over this?
I'm sure.
Yeah, I can't remember all the details that went on with that. But I was saying I had one of my pastors, the pastor at the time, asked me about, "Are you for burning the Quran?" And I told him, I said, I am, but only, and I'm not for burning to insult people, but by burning the Quran, what it does is it illuminates how shallow this faith system really is. It illuminates the behavior of these people when they feel they have been. Are you going, Paul?
I have to go. I just got an important call. Sorry.
All right, we'll see you Thursday. Is your show Thursday? He left.
Eric, I wanted to add one thing. Did you know that that's the only proper way Islamically to dispose of anything Arabic is by burning it? It's really wild. These Muslims are super ignorant. They don't even know that that's the only way that you can actually dispose of this material is by burning it. You're supposed to burn it. You can't.
You're not supposed to put it in the trash heap or what. I understand, but
that's the correct way to do it.
the way that they were burning it though was meant to offend them. And if somebody went out and burned, let's say, an American flag, I'm going to be offended. I am. I admit that. But I am not going to go out and start killing people over it. I'm not going to start killing the people who are burning it because they have a right to do that. I don't believe that that's enumerated in the Constitution, but according to current law, it is, and you have to obey the laws of the land. So I'm not going to hurt those. So, but what the difference is that those people that burn the Quran, they are attacked physically, and the people who are attacking them physically, their defense is, well, I'm offended. Well, you know what? Everybody gets offended. That does not give you the right to go out and attack people, because other people, and you like this, Isa, because they have the right to express themselves. They have the right to, free speech. So
They're the religion of perpetual offended.
yeah,
I actually 100% agree.
Yeah,
I agree to freedom. I think that's a value that we have, and you're right. It's like if someone burns a flag, then they're being a jerk. They're being dumb. I'm like, you're burning a flag of a country that's giving freedom to all these people. That's giving you freedom being here. That's not really very smart. And I'm like, if you really value something, if someone really values the Quran or any holy scripture to themselves, you'd be like, okay, I don't really like what they're doing. Write an op-ed. Like that's what civilized people do. Write an op-ed. Write something. Write a journal. That is actually really true. That's kind of interesting that Uthman burned the other manuscripts, but it's like I think you should just write an article. I think for example, wrote the Salman Rushdie wrote the Satanic Verses. I'm like, read the Satanic Verses and write an op-ed on it. No one read it. Nobody even knows what the book's about. It's the most wild thing. It's a fictional story about a Bollywood actor. That's like an Indian Hollywood actor. And I'm like, it's ridiculous. I just don't get these people. I'm sorry.
Well, they definitely have views. I wanted to ask Ed. Ed, do you know why the individual that did burn the Quran there burned it? Do you have any idea why that happened?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because it's a wicked, evil religion, and that book has no place in society whatsoever.
Okay.
The rulings that it gives for like Quran 9:5, the verse of the sword, which commands all Muslims to kill all non-Muslims. Yeah, he despises that book almost as much as I do.
Okay. I didn't know if it was, it was to get a rise out of the people that were.
Oh yeah, it was definitely geared for that as well. But he was also practicing his constitutional rights to show that Islam has no place in America, and it surely has no place trying to supersede our Constitution.
Yeah. And one of an idea for some writing that I wanted to get into deals with that idea right there, where it's Muhammad becomes the supplanter. Everything that Christ was, he tries to become in Islam. So everything that Christ was in the Christian faith, in Islam, you find Muhammad and all of, so you have this supplantation of all of these ideas. Instead of having Christ, now you have Muhammad.
Yeah, Muhammad is the Islamic God. I don't care what anybody says. You can rag out Allah all day long, and they don't care. But you say one bad thing about Muhammad, and gloves are off.
Yeah.
Let me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, let me add to on the back of both of those things. It's a canon of the church to only dispose of things, sacred items, through burning, kind of maybe as a continued Judaic tradition of burnt offering type of thing. So just, on the back of what you're saying, it's quite common for cults to commandeer or to supplant or to hijack ideas and practices to validate their own fabrications. So we do find that a lot. Muhammad steal all kinds of Christian traditions and even things that are canonical in Christianity.
Yeah, but and by doing this, and this is why I do the show, is because by doing this, he condemns people's souls to hell by trying to supplant Jesus Christ, by trying to supplant the Son of God as the Savior and somebody whose behaviors that we should emulate or follow their sunnah. That's that's why I do the shows, because he's leading people to hell is what he's essentially doing. Okay, I don't have anything else tonight, guys. I don't know if anybody has anything that they want to add.
You guys been following what's happening in the UK?
I've been following it because you've been sending me.
Oh, that's getting pretty ugly.
Yeah, it's all these clips on
We're
Twitter.
gonna put Tommy Robinson in prison for life, I bet.
What about Tommy?
Tommy Robinson, they're saying he's the mastermind. He's the one behind it, behind the scenes, promoting this, organizing it, and while he's in Cyprus on vacation.
England is lost. Who were we talking to? Maybe it was somebody on Lloyd's show the other day. I'm like, England it's just they're lost. Until this was brought up, is that there's going to be a violent civil war in order to keep this from happening, in order to keep from losing, number one, their culture and supplanting it with Islam. It's to the point now where there has to be violence. I'm not calling for it, never would, but it is so entrenched into their society that the only way to remove this hatred, this visceral hatred that people have think about this. These people are supposed to be England, what do we call them? Brits. They're supposed to be Brits themselves, and they hate their country. If you hate the country, leave, dude. Get out. Go back to that whatever you came from, or your parents came, or whatever. Get out.
No, that's not what they want to do. They want to, and I keep saying this, Islam is the Borg. They're there to assimilate. They are the Borg. I don't care what anybody says. That is the Borg religion.
Parasites.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're and also what's happening now. It looks like the Muslims are out on the street. They're calling themselves the Muslim Defense League, and they're brandishing weapons. They actually have this BBC broadcaster out there, and they're getting threatened. They had their tires. Oh, Sky News. They had their tires slashed by these angry Muslims. They're stopping people in cars and checking if they're white. If they're white, they either get beat up or their tires slashed. Yeah, dude, it's getting really nasty. And of course, the police are doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. They're letting it happen. Except if you're a non-Muslim UK British citizen and are peacefully protesting, then they will arrest you and knock and beat you and throw you in jail for a very long time. It's really getting bad.
Somebody sent. I can't remember who it was. I'm going through my. Let's see here. Going through my Facebook. I looked in Skype. It wasn't on Skype. But somebody sent me a video of a Muslim acting like he was going to throw a brick through a window. And I can't remember who did that. Was it on Facebook that was sent? Where did I get that? Good night. Wasn't an email. Was it on? It wasn't in Skype? Maybe it was in Skype. Let me see here. No, it wasn't. I don't know. It came from somebody. Was it in private chat here? No.
What are you looking for?
It was a. What is this, Nico? What are we doing here? Mahomo.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I should have warned you.
Okay.
Yeah. As you can see, it's quite controversial. You want to watch it before you show it, if you want to show it. It's something I show on my own channel, but I do a lot of crazy stuff on my own channel, so I don't want to subject you to
that. Okay. What's it from? What is it from?
It's a little game of Where's Waldo. It's kind of like I presented that. We had a Hitler sighting in Brazil, and and that kind of thing. And so, can you spot where Muhammad is in this scene, type of thing?
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, you'll skip it. All right, no problem.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We'll keep that on the download. I'm trying to find this doggone. Maybe it was Darcy. Darcy, did you send me something? Is Darcy still here?
No,
You didn't send. Somebody sent it to me.
maybe it was Dominic.
No, was it in the chat? It wasn't in. I don't think it was in the chat. It was of a guy, and it was on Facebook, for crying out loud. And you would think that I would be able to find it onto Facebook. Let me. Life shouldn't be this hard. Shouldn't be this complicated. No, that was from Ed.
You'll find it after the stream's over. That's how that works.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly when I'm going to find it. It'll be right there, standing right in front of my face. Oh, wait a second. No, it'll be right there in front of my face. I don't know what happened to it, but somebody sent me where it showed a Muslim that he was going to throw a brick through a church window, and he turns around and says, I know you all want to think that this is what we're going to do and what we want to do to your, and you want to portray us in a violent light. Well, dude, you don't have to throw a brick through a church window in order to portray what your people are doing, your fellow co-religionists are doing over there in England in a violent light. They're doing a pretty good job of it themselves. So that was the point that I was going to make on that. I guess it wasn't that important. All right, guys, I'm going to call it a night. I know this getting out of here a little bit early is not the norm. I'm not sure if anybody has any ideas for next week's show. If you do, email me at ericthecaffer@gmail.com, and I'm always open to discussing different ideas, new ideas. An idea that I would like to discuss and have one of you present is the correlation between Revelation and Mecca itself. And I'm not beneath begging somebody to do that for 2.5 years, but Ed, if you ever want to get around to doing that, I will give you the opportunity to do it. You just let me know, brother. But the rest of you that were in chat today, again, thank you everybody for coming. I saw that Avery was live, had 1,000 viewers, and I'm saying, oh, everybody's over watching him. When they get done, they'll come over here and watch me. Well, he was still live. And everybody that sits on the panel, I always appreciate and value your opinions, and what you contribute to the show. God bless y'all, and we will see you next Monday on the Cross and the Crescent.
Oh, please keep everybody in London and England, our brethren, in your prayers.
Yes.
Brother Dominic's over in London too.
Yeah.
So that's why he's not appearing.
Yeah, there was it was Bob the Builder, and there was another fella that Lloyd knew that they were looking for new apartments, new places to live. Their leases are, that place is just, I don't know. God bless them, and keep them in your prayers so they can have some resolution to all these problems they're having. All right, we'll see y'all next week. God bless.
Advanced, student, and specialist, that the standard narrative has holes. That's what I'm
that the Muslims were rioting against one another. And as much as we don't want to face the fact, the Muslims were lying sometimes. They were fabricating, they were embellishing, and that might be hard to accept, but that is a reality.